I knew something was off the moment the calendar pinged. A last-minute meeting with the managing director and HR booked at 7:56 a.m. flagged urgent. I'd seen too many of those meetings from the sidelines, never expected to star in one. The conference room was too clean, too cold. Everything about it screamed formality and finality. Chase Harlan stood at the far end of the sleek table, all pressed suit and sculpted charm, the kind of man who smelled like capital gains and lavender soap. He didn't offer a seat. Instead, he gestured toward the chair across from him like a hotel concierge telling me checkout time had arrived. "Miriam," he began smoothing the cuffs of his shirt, "today will be your final day." There was a moment, a single suspended breath, when I wasn't sure I'd heard correctly. After 25 years, this was how it started. No preamble, no lead-up, just a corporate decapitation before morning coffee. He slid a manila folder toward me. "HR has prepared your exit package. 2-month severance. Benefits through the end of the quarter. Janice will walk you through it." Janice from Human Resources sat 2 chairs down, her expression, a blend of duty and discomfort. She nodded, eyes fixed on a neutral point somewhere above my shoulder. A woman I'd once helped through her mother's estate settlement couldn't even look me in the eye. Chase leaned back, clearly rehearsed. "This restructuring affects multiple departments. It's a business decision, nothing personal." Of course it wasn't personal. That's what people always say right before they destroy the life you built. I opened the folder and glanced at the numbers, but I wasn't reading. My brain was still echoing with that single phrase, "final day." "Security will assist you in clearing out your belongings," Janice added, as though I were a misplaced file in need of disposal. I stood without another word. If they expected a scene, they didn't know me at all. As I walked back to my office, the one I'd furnished myself, the one with 25 years of framed memories, I could already see the security guard waiting at my door. I didn't cry in the elevator. I didn't cry when the security guard awkwardly carried my box of belongings to the curb. But when I got home and placed the crystal paperweight from my 20-year anniversary on the kitchen counter, my hands didn't stop shaking. I stood in my living room in a coat I hadn't taken off, staring at the remnants of a career distilled into one banker's box. A framed photo of the first client, Gala, the leather-bound strategy journal I never let out of reach, and the little ceramic mug someone made me during my 5th year that said, "Heart of the team." Cheap paint, cracked handle, irreplaceable. Back then it wasn't about metrics and automation. It was about relationships. When I joined Franklin & Sloan in 1998, we were squeezed into half a floor in a red brick building that smelled like fresh coffee and ambition. 17 clients, 5 full-time employees. I remember typing the client notes myself on the weekends just so we could start Monday ahead. Everett Sloan hired me personally. He had a mind like a scalpel and a voice like a jazz record, low, thoughtful, deliberate. Business runs on numbers, he told me in our first meeting, but relationships, they're what keep the lights on. Anyone can do the math. Not everyone can earn trust. That line shaped the next 2 decades of my life. I remembered birthdays, attended funerals, sent care packages when clients were hospitalized. I watched their children grow up, their companies expand, their trust deepen. I wasn't just a consultant. I was part of their fabric. That wasn't policy. It was instinct. But over the years, the fabric started fraying. After the new investors came in, I saw the shift. KPIs replaced client notes. Speed replaced depth. Promotions were handed to those who talked numbers, not those who built bridges. They forgot the soul of the firm. They forgot what Everett had taught us. And in the end, they forgot me. The paperweight caught the last of the light as I turned toward the hallway, my phone buzzing faintly from the kitchen counter. The phone stopped buzzing, but I didn't check it. I already knew it wasn't someone from the firm. I hadn't mattered enough to them yesterday. Why would I matter today? I poured myself a glass of water and sat at the kitchen table. The silence was thick, but it gave space for memory to creep in, slow and unwelcome. 6 months ago, I stayed late after a quarterly planning session. I was walking past the executive conference room when I heard Chase's voice through the frosted glass. "Legacy fat," he said with a laugh. "She's good at birthdays and hand-holding, but we need velocity now. That kind of overhead can't justify its weight anymore." I stood frozen outside that door, hands clenched, heart pounding. They were talking about me like I was a rounding error on a spreadsheet. The woman who had shepherded over a dozen of their highest grossing accounts was now dead weight. After that, the changes came fast. My name disappeared from weekly strategy agendas. The monthly review decks, once routed through me for context, were handed to junior analysts who didn't know a client's name unless it was in bold. I'd walk by a meeting room and see people I'd trained young, bright eager, now taking calls I used to handle, fumbling through scripts I'd written myself. They stopped copying me on emails. It wasn't a mistake. It was erasure. The moment that still stung most was a client check-in with Golden Elm Capital. I logged into the call only to realize the meeting had been moved without my knowledge and the invite list revised. I sat there alone, watching the minutes tick by. When I asked Chase later, he said it must have been an oversight, then turned to speak with someone else before I could respond. He wasn't interested in oversight. He was making space, and I was what needed to be cleared. I should have seen it coming, but I didn't want to believe it. I had let loyalty blind me. The glass in my hand sweated onto my palm. I wiped it dry and stood finally reaching for the phone that had buzzed earlier. The caller ID made me pause. It was Catherine Winters. I let it ring once more before answering. Catherine Winters never called without purpose, and she never called twice. "Ruth," she said, skipping the pleasantries I just heard. "Please tell me it's not true." There was no use sugarcoating it. "It is." She went quiet for a beat, the silence thick with disbelief. "They're calling it a restructure," she said. Eventually her voice clipped. "But why you?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. Catherine had been with me for over a decade. She knew what I brought to the table because we'd built it together, one review, one crisis, one quiet win at a time. "I'm meeting with my board next Thursday," she said. "We'll be reviewing vendor contracts. I need to know if you'll be there." "No," I said, trying to keep my voice even. "They reassigned my accounts." "To who?" "Melissa Bennett." Catherine exhaled hard, the one who tried to reteach me my own distribution model. That woman, I didn't defend the decision. I didn't say much at all. We both knew what wasn't being said. After the call ended, I sat still staring at the wall. 10 minutes later, my email pinged. 2 more clients had reached out. Belinda from Summit Financial wanted a check-in, her tone unusually formal. Then came a text from Douglas at Archer Pharmaceuticals. "Is it true? When can we talk?" By sunset, there were 5. Not one of them heard from me first. I didn't complain. I didn't rant. I simply confirmed the facts, answered questions calmly, and told them I wished them continued success. I didn't have to say more. In industries like ours, people talk. They serve on the same nonprofit boards. They sit on the same conference panels. You don't need to shout in this world. You just need to disappear and let others feel the silence you leave behind. The next morning, I opened my inbox and saw 3 new messages flagged urgent. One from a mid-market manufacturing client, one from an institutional banking group, and one marked simply, "From the desk of Everett Sloan." I hadn't spoken to Everett Sloan in nearly a year, not since he'd shifted into that ambiguous founder emeritus role, present when convenient, absent when needed. So when his name appeared in my inbox, I hesitated. But it wasn't an email. It was a meeting request. And it was urgent. I agreed to meet him in the Atrium Cafe below the firm's downtown office tower. He was already seated when I arrived, looking thinner than I remembered, his salt and pepper hair slightly undone from the wind. "Ruth," he said as I approached. He stood reaching for a handshake that felt unsure, like a man meeting a former business partner and a ghost at once. "I just got back from Geneva last night," he said, quickly skipping any preamble. And I need to say, I had no idea what Chase did. None of this was run through me. I watched him carefully measuring the sincerity in his eyes. There was some. But behind it, I saw something else. Fear. "I'm sorry, Everett," I said evenly, "but it happened. Whether you signed off or not," he lowered his voice, leaning in. "I've spoken to the board. Clients are leaving or threatening to. Catherine Winters, Douglas Summit Westridge. We're hemorrhaging." I let the names settle between us. They weren't just accounts. They were relationships I'd built brick by brick, year by year. "We need you back," he said. "We'll make it right. Title change, compensation, autonomy, partner-level authority if that's what it takes." It should have felt satisfying, but it didn't. Why now, I asked. His eyes dropped for just a second too long, because the firm is at risk. And there it was. Not because I had been wronged, not because my work had mattered, but because the structure was crumbling and I had become useful again. I stirred the coffee in front of me but didn't sip it. "You're not trying to fix what happened to me. You're trying to survive what's happening to you." He didn't deny it. "I'll think about it," I said quietly. "But I'm also meeting with Delia Crane this afternoon." His face twitched at the name, and in that moment he knew exactly how much leverage he'd lost. Delia Crane didn't waste time with introductions. She was already seated at our table, at Layton's, the quiet corner bistro, where half of Boston's consulting deals were born and buried. "You look calm," she said, tapping the edge of her glass. "I'd be on fire." I shrugged. "I've learned not to ignite anything I don't intend to carry." She smiled, crisp and approving. "Let's get to it then." She slid a folder across the table, thin but heavy with implication. Inside, Blackwell Strategies, a mid-size firm with steady growth, stable leadership, and a reputation for keeping clients longer than their staff. They were offering a full partner role, not in name, but equity. A real seat at the table, full autonomy over a new division, client trust and strategy, with my name at the helm. The numbers were generous, nearly double what I'd made before, but it wasn't the money that made me sit straighter. It was the structure. "You built the foundation of that firm," Delia said plainly. "Everyone in this city knows it, and now that foundation's looking for a new address." I closed the folder, letting its weight sit between us. "I've had other calls," I admitted. "People are reaching out, clients, even competitors. But I'm not interested in being a symbol or a scalp." "You won't be," she said. "At Blackwell, you'll build. No bureaucracy, no apologies, and no Chase Harlan lurking outside your office door." That last bit nearly made me laugh. Delia leaned forward. "The only reason we haven't made this official is because we were waiting for you to see what they really thought of you. Now that you have..." She let the sentence finish itself. I didn't commit that afternoon. I didn't have to. But I left the restaurant with something I hadn't felt in days, a sense of stillness. I wasn't angry. I wasn't anxious. I was deliberate. The next morning, I received 3 more client emails, short, direct, asking one thing: where I was headed next. And then, just after noon, came the first headline. It started with a headline buried 3 scrolls down on the Boston Financial Wire: unrest at Franklin and Sloan amid executive changes. I didn't think much of it at first. Just the usual market noise, anonymous sources, vague murmurs, nothing solid. But by late afternoon, my inbox was full. Westridge had canceled their quarterly review. Archer's general counsel was requesting immediate renegotiation of terms. Summit Financial's board had postponed all new engagements until further notice. Catherine Winters had already gone silent, and when Catherine goes silent, something is happening behind the curtain. I hadn't said a word, hadn't reached out. I had no need. The firm was unraveling all on its own, tugged loose by threads no one had thought to protect. That evening, I sat on the edge of my bed, phone in hand, reading messages I never expected. One was from my former assistant, Theo Short, and rattled, "Dominic is spiraling. They're blaming each other. Clients are walking. No one knows who's next." But it wasn't the exodus that surprised me. It was what came next. Delia called the next morning. Her voice was different, controlled, but charged. Blackwell's parent investor, she said, just acquired controlling interest in one of Franklin's key funding groups. It's not public yet, but it will be. I blinked the silence between us, stretching into something electric. They'd been eyeing Boston for a while, she continued, and your exit created the perfect opening. You weren't the trigger, Ruth. You were the opportunity. I leaned back into the kitchen chair, trying to process it. I hadn't asked for any of this. I hadn't strategized a revenge plan or written any letters. But now the very people who had discarded me were looking over their shoulders, realizing their grip on the company was loosening. And Blackwell, quiet, patient Blackwell, had positioned itself to catch what fell. By the end of the day, I'd received word that the Franklin board had called an emergency meeting for the following week. My name wasn't on the agenda, but I had no doubt it would be said. That night, I drafted a simple email to Delia, let's meet. I'm ready to move forward. The elevator ride to the 32nd floor felt both familiar and foreign. Same panels, same soft music, but this time no security badge, no ID clipped to my lapel. Just me, a tailored suit, and a name no longer tied to a company email address. When the doors opened, the reception desk went still. Madison, the assistant who once brought me my favorite tea during late deadlines, blinked twice before finding her voice. Miss Caulfield, are you here for the board meeting? I am, I said, simply. Everett's expecting me. The conference room was already filling. Partners from across the country leaned over laptops, whispering in clipped tones. I caught fragments of sentences: client attrition emergency vote, Dominic's damage control. Everett stood at the head of the table, tense but composed. Dominic was notably absent. He looked up when I entered. Relief swept across his face like someone seeing the cavalry arrive. Thank you all for coming, he began, as I took a seat in the far corner. As you're aware, we're facing a period of significant transition. Our clients have voiced serious concerns, and today we need to respond, not just react. Murmurs followed. Eyes glanced toward me, quiet anticipation crawling through the room. I'm pleased to share, Everett continued, that Miriam Caulfield has agreed to return to Franklin & Sloan, this time as a full equity partner. There was a ripple of cautious applause. All heads turned to me. I stood slow and calm. Thank you, Everett, I began, but I'm not returning. The silence that followed was thick enough to touch. I've accepted a partnership at Blackwell Strategies, I said clearly, and I'll be leading the integration of Franklin & Sloan's client accounts. As part of Blackwell's new acquisition team, chairs shifted, papers rustled. Someone gasped outright. Everett's smile fell from his face like a loose mask. What acquisition? Delia's voice came from the doorway before I could answer. Blackwell now holds controlling interest in Franklin & Sloan's primary investor group. The transfer will be finalized by Monday. Gasps turned to shouting. Confusion erupted into motion. I remained still. When the board voted 2 hours later, Dominic was gone. The first week after the acquisition was chaos wrapped in protocol. Forms to sign, systems to audit, rooms full of stunned employees suddenly remembering my name. Some tried too hard, offering coffee, unsolicited praise, awkward apologies, couched as compliments. Others just nodded when I passed, unsure how to act around someone who now outranked them. I didn't hold it against them. I didn't hold anything, really, not anymore. The real shift came from the clients. Catherine Winters scheduled a call the day after the announcement. She skipped the pleasantries. Smart move, she said. I've already told my team we're staying with Blackwell. You bring continuity. They bring vision. She wasn't alone. Douglas, Belinda, Westridge all confirmed. Even the smaller accounts that had wavered quietly asked to resume service. Not because of Blackwell's name, because of mine. That realization hit me harder than the numbers ever could. I kept things professional, focused on stabilizing operations. The firm was now called Blackwell Franklin Consulting, a hyphen-free merger with a clean logo and a tighter mission statement, client first always. I didn't need to rewrite the culture. I just reminded people what it used to be. 3 weeks in Everett asked to meet. He looked older. Not broken, just quieter. I suppose this is the part where I say congratulations. He said, hands folded carefully across the table. I didn't plan any of this. I said. But you didn't stop it either. No, I didn't. He nodded, eyes fixed on the table between us. So what happens now, I slid a folder across to him, simple, unembellished. A consulting role, I said. 3 years. No voting power, no executive authority. Just your experience on record. You still know things no one else does. He looked at the offer for a long time. Is this mercy, he asked. No, it's structure. You built the bones of this place. That still matters. He signed it without another word. Later that day, I stood in my new office watching the city shift outside the window, and as the sun moved lower behind the skyline, a name flashed across my screen, Catherine Winters again requesting a lunch meeting. 6 months passed, and the air felt different, now lighter, as if the building itself had let go of something it had been holding too long. The name on the door had changed, but it wasn't just branding. The tone in the hallways had shifted. People greeted one another again. Clients called without anxiety in their voices. And for the first time in years, I looked forward to Mondays. I sat in my corner office that morning reviewing the quarterly numbers. They were strong, up 22% year over year, but that wasn't what mattered most. What mattered was that 97% of our clients had stayed. The same ones Dominic once deemed too dependent on legacy personalities had chosen to trust us through the transition, not because we promised more, but because we honored what had already been built. I didn't lead with spreadsheets. I led with names, context, and understanding. I brought back the client review logs. I re-established direct contact protocols. I even revived the old birthday list. Small things, yes. But small things done consistently become the culture. My assistant knocked just before noon. Ms. Winters is here for lunch. I smiled and stood. Send her in. Catherine entered with her usual precision, her coat sharp, her voice sharper. But when we sat at the table in the executive dining room, her tone softened. You did it, she said, stirring her tea. You really turned this ship. It wasn't just me. No, she agreed, but it needed someone to steer. She set her cup down and leaned in slightly. You didn't chase revenge, Miriam. You didn't burn them down. You just walked out and let them feel the absence. I said nothing, just held her gaze. That, she added, is why we followed you, because you weren't trying to win a war. You were protecting something real. After lunch, I returned to my office and stood for a while at the window watching the soft rhythm of downtown move below me. For all the noise that had surrounded my exit, my return had been quiet, deliberate, whole. In the end, I hadn't rewritten the rules. I'd simply remembered them and reminded everyone else.